packed. We've been around for about 25 years. We go from Pemberton to Chilliwack. Obviously, we service the Lower Mainland area, which is probably where most of you are working. Multiple inspectors. We do commercial inspections as well as residential inspections, and as well as doing the home inspection, we also offer mold testing services, which we'll talk a little bit about later. What we're going to learn today, a little bit on strata depreciation reports, common findings from a home inspection in Vancouver, the top 3 deal breakers from resulting from the inspection, and the pros and cons of inspection. So we all know if you're having trouble getting to sleep at night, you don't want to take a pill, a strata depreciation report will get you there pretty quick. What's in a strata depreciation report? We've seen them, some are this thick, some are a couple pages. Basically, there is no standardized format. There's a physical component. They're going to look at what the building has, windows, roofs, elevators, the physical bricks and mortar. They're going to look at what the estimated service life of that is. Typically, they do use a 30-year time horizon. And finally, what parts are owner responsibility, or what's common property versus what's an owner responsibility. There's the financial component, the dollars in the contingency fund, and also the anticipated projected costs over the next 30 years. A little history. So 2013 was when the legislation got passed that said every strata must have a strata depreciation report, unless it's deferred, so it requires a 75% vote by the owners to defer it. If there's less than 5 lots in the strata, or a new strata is exempt. They're supposed to be updated every 3 years. So one of the challenges we're finding is we're seeing a lot of, there's still lots of stratas that don't have them. The estimate I've heard talking to groups of realtors is about half the stratas have them. So that means half don't. The other challenge we're finding is, yes, they have one, but it's dated 2013. So it's now 5 years old. So what does that mean? It means you have to do a little bit of digging to figure out kind of what they've done in the last 5 years. Yeah, normally there's an executive summary that has sort of the good stuff. So the first thing when we get them is we look to see what the date is. We look to see who wrote it, because there's half a dozen really good engineering companies writing really valuable reports that have lots of good information presented in a useful manner. And then there's some companies out there that, so the issue is any qualified person can do a strata depreciation report. So all you have to do is say, I'm a qualified person, and you too can do strata depreciation reports. There is no government stipulation as to what a qualified person is at this point. So a strata arguably could do their own if they had somebody on board that was a contractor, had some commercial building management experience, and they had somebody else on board that was a financial person that could do the projections and the costing. They could arguably do their own, and that might actually be better than some of the ones we've seen. So again, we try to, as part of our strata properties, we offer, as our company offers, to review the strata depreciation report and also any engineer's reports, building envelope reports, that kind of thing. Some home inspection companies say, no, that has nothing to do with us. We're not going to do that. We're not supposed to do it. All we're going to look at is the unit entitlement. Our attitude is we're far. The tour where you pay the $50, $75, $100 to walk around and see the roof, the mechanical room, and whatever. If they've got a strata depreciation report, the time is much better spent on that. The whirlwind tour, very few home inspectors are qualified to inspect the mechanical systems in a high-rise building, and the couple of minutes that you spend sort of looking in and walking around, you're not, short of, yes, water was spraying across the room, other than those really obvious things, the home inspector really isn't going to add a huge amount of value in that little whirlwind tour. So I would normally say save that money, put it towards something else, and let's spend the time reviewing the strata depreciation report or the engineer's report. We've had people approach us and say, well, our client doesn't think they need an inspection, can we just pay you to review those documents? And of course, we always try to help people, so the answer is yes. And some people say, well, they've got a depreciation report, it says that this is what the building's going to cost, do they really need to get a home inspection? So Tony Giovante, head of Condo Owners Association of British Columbia, has said the strata depreciation report does not replace the home inspection, and they recommend that all buyers get a home inspection as well. We know with multiple offers, sometimes it's a challenge, the client doesn't want one. You can always plant the seed of, let's put in our offer, but then let's get you a home inspection afterwards to see if there are any issues. So we do, obviously, we're looking to see if the thing's going to fall down or that sort of thing, but there's lots of things that we add value in the process by looking at the age of the smoke detectors, safety devices, that kind of thing. So there is merit to getting a home inspection afterwards, even if they didn't get one. We can do a consultation We don't advertise it to the public. It's only to realtors that we talk about it. It's basically a 1 hour verbal walk through the property. We can do it by phone with the client, talk to them at the end, or basically we just try and get them more information in order to be able to proceed ahead, because we understand they don't necessarily always want to get an inspection if it's a multiple offer situation. So why are we doing a home inspection of a strata property? We're looking at the materials and any structural problems of that particular unit. Sometimes, townhouse units will go up and we'll find there's a mold issue in the attic. And there was actually, I think, a CTV or CBC had a big thing about somebody bought a brand new home, 5 years later, there's mold in the attic that nobody knew. Why is it there? The builder said it's not my problem. So, do newer properties need inspection? Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Do we identify ways for you to negotiate the price? One of my home inspector competitors out there, I don't know how busy he is, claims that the result of having him do your home inspection is he will find at least $5,000 in things you can negotiate off the price. Wow. I love my competition. In our market that just isn't. We tell clients, look, you're working with your expert agent to figure out what the fair market value of this is. We're going to give you the information to proceed confidently with that choice, or we're going to, if we find something that hasn't been factored into that price, you're going to go back and talk to your agent and say, now what? It's a way to reassure the buyer about the decision. Often by the time we're doing the inspection, the sort of second doubts and whatnot are coming in, and so we do get some clients that are, should I buy this home? Often we'll say something along the lines of, this is going to be a great home for somebody, you just need to decide if the shoe fits you. And finally, we give them an official report with documentation. Why the negative aspects of a home inspector? There's a limit to the inspection. It's visual. We don't have X-ray vision. We're not allowed to rip holes in the walls like they do on TV. Home inspectors aren't contractors. Sometimes clients will be like, well, how much is that going to cost? So we try to bear in mind that we've got a wide range of clients. Some are experts that have renovated several homes before, and others have no idea whether a light bulb costs the same or more than a hot water tank. So we do give them orders of magnitude. That's a $100 problem, or that's a $1,000 problem, or that's a $10,000 problem. Possibility of deterring buyers. We all understand you've invested a lot of time with this client. You're wanting to make sure they have a good experience. So we focus a lot in our company on how to deliver the information in a very neutral way. So we call it the Goldilocks approach. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. You don't want to sort of whitewashing actual real problems. We don't want somebody to buy a home thinking it doesn't need any work when clearly the bathrooms need to be restored, renovated and upgraded if they don't have the money for that. And there's a cost to the home inspection. Polybutylene piping. Everybody heard of polybutylene piping? So great. It was used from sort of the early mid 80s, 1983-ish to 1999, late 90s. So sort of the same vintage as leaky condos, but totally unrelated. It's a very distinctive gray plastic piping, and often a good place to look for it is under the kitchen sink. If you look, there's normally a T where the hot water tees off to the dishwasher, and you can often see a connection, a little bit of piping there. Not in every house, but lots of homes. Sometimes the only piece of polybutylene piping in the whole home will be the connection from that hot water under the kitchen sink to the dishwasher. Obviously, that's pretty easy to replace. Again, we're now at 2018. You go back from 1983 to 2018, you do the math. I mean, that's any piping that's failing at this point really isn't premature or a defect. It's now getting into life cycle. Copper piping has a service life, gets replaced 30, 50 years, depending on the application, that sort of thing. Early on, when it first got installed, they would have issues where the pipe failed in the first few years. So there was a couple of situations, either when they first started using it, and it was a result of cost savings. First of all, copper prices went up, and so this was now cost effective. They had two options to use: either brass fittings, which seemed to have less problems associated with them, or plastic fittings. And so nobody really knows exactly what why they had failures. There's sort of dissimilar fittings. So the plastic fitting and the plastic pipe, with different temperatures, they would expand and contract, and they would just come apart, and then lots of water would flow. They had issues with the plastic pipe itself deteriorating. So we don't know whether that was poor manufacturing, whether it was the pipe was left out in the sun too long before it was installed and didn't have enough UV inhibitor in it, and so the pipe breaks down. some of the fittings are starting to wear out. So there's at this point, it's kind of, if it's a 1983 bathroom, it's probably going to get upgraded in the near future because it's a 30-year-old bathroom. When the plumber says, hey, while I'm replacing the bathroom and the shower and all this stuff, let's replace the plastic piping, he's not trying to, earn himself a free trip to Hawaii. He's providing your client with good advice. So, anything that's prematurely failed has really been dealt with, and anything that is now, now is just going to get addressed with life cycle kind of thing. In terms of cost, the last time we discussed it with a client and their contractor for a 2.5 bathroom, 3-bedroom townhouse, it was in the $5,000 to $10,000 range to repipe the townhouse. Half was plumbing and half was painting and drywall. So it's not a, that's not a trivial amount of money, but it's also not a, it's not $100,000 or anything. Listening to the radio, watching TV. Right now, WorkSafe BC is campaigning heavily for asbestos testing for renovation projects. The date they're using is 1990. So any home that is 1990 or older is considered to have a risk of asbestos-containing building materials. The other date that we use when we're talking to clients is 1983. So 1983 is when all the legislation was passed by the government saying, don't be installing asbestos-containing building materials in residences anymore. But what they found was there was old material in the warehouse, in contractors' garages, that kind of thing. So 1983 to 1990 is kind of the transition or gray zone. Your home may have some, it may have none, but testing is going to be required to when you go to do renovation. So we make sure we educate our client. First of all, we tell them if it's an older home, if it's pre-1990 or pre-1983, well, all the homes of this age are going to have a similar risk. So it's, unless they, the only way to manage that is to buy a newer home. And I don't think the market places any sort of premium on removing all the asbestos from your house at this point. They're much more attuned to saying that's a great new bathroom. So where do we find asbestos in homes? It could be in flooring materials like the sheet vinyl flooring from the 70s. This sort of ducting in older homes, you see this white tape on the ducting to seal the ducts to stop air leakage. That would frequently contain asbestos as part of the mix. Old wood windows in the caulking or the putty could have asbestos material in it. There's a siding material that's an asbestos cladding. Often it's sort of more of shingle-like, but it looks very similar to like a hardy plank product in their shingle. Or there's also a cedar that looks very similar. So it's important that the home inspector kind of doesn't just make a snap judgment and say, oh, that's asbestos, because if it's cedar, there's no issue. And where most common in the home inspection we find is up in the attic of older homes. So that would be homes from the 30s to the 50s, maybe 60s would be, where we'd be specifically looking for that. It's one of two situations. Either we poke our head through the attic hatch and you see kind of a field of kitty litter. It looks, for all the world, kind of like kitty litter with a bit of shine to it. Or there's an insulation, but when we lift the insulation, there's a couple of inches of vermiculite underneath. So we used to do testing, and now it really doesn't matter because all the test says, even if the test is negative, it just says that sample is negative. It doesn't say that the whole roof. So what we've encountered is the mortgage company may say, yeah, that needs to be removed. So CMHC, in our reports, we talk about, we give the client a link to CMHC, Canadian Mortgage Housing, pretty reputable group. They say there's no risk to you living in the house as long as the material is in good condition and you don't go and roll around in the attic. So don't let the kids play up there, don't be doing work in there without taking proper precautions. But from an actual occupancy point of the view, it's not considered to be a risk to the occupant. All of the commercials you're hearing about are meant to protect the guy who does demolition work, 5 days a week, 50 weeks a year. That's the guy they're concerned about, his exposure. They're not concerned about people living in houses. They're not recommending you remove it from your house. What they're saying is when you get a renovation, your contractor should do testing and the area should be properly treated, asbestos removed before work goes on. And that also protects the person living in the house because you don't want to contaminate your house with asbestos. Now the reality is there's probably asbestos in our drinking water because there's still lots of asbestos cement pipe out there. Industrial applications still use asbestos. You can eat asbestos, you can drink it. It's just, if you breathe in the fibers over a long period of time in enough, then it leads to lung cancer. So that's why the the concern is. So we go to a big effort to make sure the client is, walked away from the ledge, and that they understand that this is pretty normal and that all houses that are older are going to have this. The only issue sometimes is if somebody in their family had lung cancer or whatever, they may be a little bit more concerned about it than the average person. What happens when we find it? I've seen it done where the seller says, yeah, that's already factored into the price. It was disclosed, kind of thing. Sometimes nobody knew about it, in which case sometimes the buyer pays, sometimes the seller pays, sometimes they split it. That's up to you as real estate agents to figure out how to do that. It's really, compared to oil tanks, it's actually a much easier thing to deal with because the running rate is about $12 a square foot. So 2,000 square foot home on 2 floors, 1,000 square foot footprint, be about $12,000. That includes removing all the vermiculite, air testing, and putting in new R40 insulation. It's kind of like oil tanks. Back in the 80s, they went around and they said, okay, you've had an oil tank, let's see if there's any oil in it. We'll pump it out, we'll fill it full of sand, and you're now good forever. Fast forward 40 years later, now they're saying, no, it doesn't matter that you did what we told you to do 40 years ago. Now you need to dig it up and remove it as part of the transaction. So we don't do oil tank testing. The oil tank removal companies are happy to come out and do it either for free or for a nominal charge because they want the work of removing them. If you need a reference or an introduction to somebody that'll do that for you, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Really, we shouldn't be dealing with the oil tank at the home inspection stage. It should have been addressed at the listing side. So, all the better agents are having it either pre-scanned for oil tank and having a clearance form as part of their preparation of getting the house staged and ready to go. But, our moisture meters, which are really density meters, we've got thermal imaging. We're not really doing a full building envelope evaluation of the home. We're using the tools to confirm our visual findings. Who thinks aluminum wiring is perfectly safe? Trick question. Yeah, so BC Hydro brings the power to your house using aluminum wiring. That's what all their transmission lines are. The line from the transmission to your house is aluminum wiring. In a brand new house, it's still quite common to see aluminum wiring from the service to the panel, and then from the panel to the range, a sub panel, a hot tub. Any of the higher 240 volt kind of loads would be perfectly acceptable to run an aluminum wiring. There's nothing wrong with aluminum wiring. It was used in the late 60s to early mid 70s. Copper prices went up. It was cost effective for the contractor to use aluminum. And if it's an original install with the original plugs and receptacles, it's considered to be fine. What happens is everybody loves their beautiful Decora style switches and receptacles. So the square shape, rectangular shape plugs and receptacles. The brand name is Decora, although I think other companies make them now as well. They don't make an aluminum rated device. So when you look on the back of them in the fine print, it says copper only. So if it's a professional electrician, they know they're not supposed to hook those up to aluminum wiring. The challenge is, the earnest homeowner thinks, hey, this is an easy thing I can do. I'll go out, I'll buy a bunch of these, I'll hook them up. So what we'll do is when we open the panel, we look to see if there's any aluminum wiring in the panel. If we see it on the branch circuits for lights and plugs, then we'll typically spot check a couple of switches, and we can sort of carefully look inside to see if the aluminum wire is being directly connected to a Decora style device. If it is, then we're going to take a picture and recommend further evaluation by a professional electrician. What they're supposed to have done was take the end of the aluminum wire and taken a short length of copper wire and some antioxidant goop and a special moret that's rated for aluminum, and they're supposed to twist it on and basically convert that aluminum wire now into a copper wire. You don't replace all the wiring in the house. Not required. The wiring's just fine. The issue is oxidation of the aluminum and whether the devices are rated and suitable for connection. So if it's a 1960s, 70s house, sometimes the insurance brokers will flag it and ask for an evaluation by an electrician, in which case Power Check or another electrical company can go in, do an evaluation, provide a comfort letter. But if we see the aluminum wire connected to a Decora non-rated device, we're going to recommend, because it's for safety purposes, that it be evaluated. So typically, again, that sort of 3-bedroom townhouse, it would be a few $1,000s. It's all just labor They have to take everything, apart, convert it to the copper wire, and then reconnect it. So pretty simple, straightforward, and then they provide a letter saying we've done all this work, and then that's available for when that seller goes to resell. So mold is not really a huge issue in our climate. I mean, it is and it isn't. Mold is all around us. Mold is outside. Mold is Mother Nature's way of doing cleanup. CMHC in their air quality courses says you don't really need to know the long Latin name of that organic growth. You just need to know why it's there. So in our home inspection, we're looking for the visual causes. So typically, dust plus moisture equals mold. So often it's hygiene or water penetration. So the big bucks, we're really looking for the water penetration. Is there water penetration of the building structure leading to deterioration? That's what the home inspector is really looking for. And we're looking to see if there is mold, whether it appears to be related to hygiene, meaning it's just not clean enough, or the humidity levels are a bit too high, or is it an indicator of a more significant issue? So the first step is a visual examination. So for years we just tried to talk people out of mold testing and explain why they didn't really need it, and for most people, and we still do that, and most people are quite happy with that. We do get a few people that either they're older, they've got young kids, or they have a known health issue, asthma, something like that, and so they're like, well, no, we want to do a mold test. So we can do the mold testing as part of the home inspection. We can do the samples at the home inspection, and then we drop them off at the lab, and the lab typically takes 3 to 4 days to turn them around unless you want to pay for rush service. If your client needs faster turnaround, there is one of the companies will come out and they'll slap their big laboratory microscope on the kitchen table, and they'll go around and sample and tell you in real time whether they've found anything, and then they take the results back to the lab, and the guy signs the report for the next day. So if you've got a client with known health issues, certainly let us know in advance, and we can help them out with that. Again, it's a visual examination. Sometimes the mold testing is inconclusive. It'll say, yeah, we found some of these spores, and they're the bad kind. And how does that help anybody? Is it outside contamination? So there is an element of interpretation and management of the findings. You can't just go get mold testing and sort of think that's going to be green or red. A lot of times it seems to fall in the gray zone. So that's where a good solid home inspection and a good solid providing the information in the proper way to your client will make all the difference. The next step is, like I say, if we do see signs, we can do the mold testing and proceed from there. We've gone into attics that are black with mold and done air testing, and the air testing in that attic is still better than outside. Often we can kind of just take your finger and sort of scrape away that superficial layer of black mold, and the wood underneath is pristine, clean and dry. Sometimes, there's the mold, and then you see some white, and that's an indication that the moisture levels are high enough that there actually is deterioration starting, and that's the more significant concern. And the reality is all sorts of areas, Squamish, Pemberton, areas of the North Shore, it's not uncommon to see some mold, particularly on the north aspect of the roof. And that's not a case of inadequate ventilation. There's some, if you're interested in knowing more, if you Google night sky cooling, it talks about how you get warm, moist air during the day, it gets into the attic, and then it cools off at night, and the underside of the roof becomes like that cold beverage can. The moisture condenses on it. And so if you get enough days where there's humidity and moisture in the air, that you get the moisture enough to cause deterioration. But often, like I say, we look at a little bit of mold, but it actually doesn't have any real deterioration to it. So again, it's kind of a judgment call. The deal breakers at or after the inspection. That's what you're all here for. So the most common result that we see where a deal doesn't go through would be information that comes to light that wasn't previously disclosed that really could have been. So like I say, as a home inspector, this is what we do all the time. You tell us the age of the house and where it is and that sort of thing, and we immediately kind of go, okay, I'm going to look for this, this, and this. And I drive up to the house and I go, yeah, I'm definitely looking for those 3 things. And then lo and behold, I find those 3 things. I'm not really surprised. Like it fits it's like profiling. And the answer is those three things could have been predetermined as part of the listing prep, could have been identified with a pre-listing inspection. A knowledgeable homeowner may know of them and disclose them, but the issue sometimes is it's an estate sale or somebody died or moved. It's interesting, in the rest of North America, pre-listing inspections are fairly common. BMW, Porsche, Mercedes, they all have pre-certified used cars. The Vancouver market really hasn't been that big on pre-listing inspections, and certainly as a home inspector, I'm not here to drive the market, but from your perspective, it's something to think about in your listing presentation and all the work you put into selling a single-family home. Do you really want all that negotiation and then to get to the nth hour and find something that really wasn't surprising at all? If we do a pre-listing inspection or consultation and we find something, that was already in the price. Nobody says you have to remove the vermiculite insulation. Nobody says you have to upgrade the furnace. It can all be factored into the already agreed to price, and then the home inspection doesn't find anything else. Or misinterpretation of the inspection information leading to the deal falling through. And so what are the solutions? On-site walkthroughs with the inspector, proactive agent involvement or access to the report, and ongoing client support. So I get all of you, you're fairly experienced agents, you've got some home inspectors that you've worked with before, you're comfortable with them. Hopefully you might give us a try in future. But sometimes you get the client that says, I'm going to use Uncle Bob. Or Uncle Bob told me about this guy, I got to use Uncle Bob's guy. So great, how can you manage that issue in your inspection? I would encourage you with all your spare time, I say that jokingly, give Uncle Bob a call ahead of the inspection and say, hey, you're a new home inspector, I haven't worked with you before, I'm really excited about potentially adding you to the list of home inspectors I refer to my clients. Would it be possible to see a sample report? They send you a sample report. You look through and you go, wow, that actually looks like a pretty good solid report, nothing's too exciting. Or they send you the 400-page report with everything in red and no house will pass. From that, you will make a conclusion of either this guy looks like he knows what he's talking about, I can relax a little bit, or I think I may have my work cut out for me. Ask the home inspector if you haven't worked with him, if you can come along for the inspection review. So there's two types of home inspectors out there. One encourages the client to come along for the whole inspection with a view that the client will learn more. Really, most home inspectors are taught that if the client comes along for the whole thing and sees the whole inspection and gets to bond with you a little bit, they're less likely to sue you. So that's really why home inspectors encourage the client to come along for the whole thing, not that they're really trying to educate the client. We encourage them to come along for the last half hour. And the reason is we want to focus on inspecting, figuring everything out, coming up with all the answers, and then we want to focus on communicating. I'm a boy, I can do one thing at a time, sort of okay. When I'm looking at them and I say the furnace filter needs replacement, and their eyes go up, I can say, no, I didn't say the furnace needed a replacement, I said the $5 filter needed a replacement. So it's really important to be able to eyeball the client, make sure they understand what you're saying, and that we're communicating properly. I encourage you, like I say, if it's a home inspector you haven't worked with before and you've got the 400-page report that looks terrible, ask if you can come along for the walkthrough. Just tell them, hey, I find that I always learn something during the home inspection findings. I'm always trying to become more knowledgeable about the product I sell. Would it be okay if I come along? Some home inspectors will be like, no, it's between me and the client, and they have this very adversarial relationship with real estate agents. I don't get that, but it's just something you need to figure out and manage. Don't feel free to ask clarifying questions when the inspector is talking with their client, but don't try and go toe to toe on technical stuff. Any home inspector worth the salt is going to be, okay, I'm here to be the technical expert. My job is to have the answers. If I don't know, I should tell you I don't know. If he says something that's wrong, just make a little note and debrief your client later. But don't get into an altercation in front of your client with the home inspector. Just be a sponge, absorb, see how your client's reacting to the information, and then when the home inspector goes away, you can take your client and go, okay, now I heard them say this, this, and this, and that doesn't sound like what these other inspectors I've always talked about this. What do you want to do? Do you want to bring in another inspector? Are you comfortable with that? Or in my opinion, he's making a big deal out of things that aren't a big deal. But let the home inspector do his thing and then let him leave, and then you can take back control of your client's experience. So, number 3 issue is they didn't book the right home inspection company, they didn't book us. I like that one, eh? Because I'm in a room with real estate agents. If I don't ask you to use this for your next inspection, you're not going to respect me as professional salespeople, because I know you're constantly asking people for your referrals. So.